Oh, we should probably start recording.
Yes, let's do that in 3, 2, and 1. Beautiful. Hello, YouTubians. You are getting
YouTubeites,
YouTubians,
YouTuberellas.
You're all getting a little bit of a taste of our live recording of our podcast,
Yes.
which is called The Pouch. And we deal with Australian news and politics.
Yeah, not so seriously though,
Booyah.
Greg.
Like a slam dunk, Jake. Like an absolute slam dunk.
I was ready. I was coiled. I was springed.
Yep. You were sprunged. I love it. Now, I can see the comments. So if you're on YouTube and you're watching, please leave a comment in the comments section about the week in Australian news and politics. The week, of course, being, it's Friday, August 21st. So you can do the maths backwards from that. And you can let us know what's happening. If you've got any questions about Australia, about what's happening in Australia, about our handling of coronavirus, about what's happening with our politicians, about upcoming bushfire seasons, anything like that. How many snakes does it take to, eliminate an army of mice, that sort of thing. We have all the answers.
We do, and we are prepared to give you those answers.
I'm prepared. I have my notebook in front of me. I'm ready to go. We've got some great news to talk about this week. We're going to get started, and we'll give you a bit more of an introduction as to what is involved in this particular show. So welcome, YouTubians.
Yeah.
All right. Now, it does help to bring up the script.
Yes.
I've heard.
Something that will help.
So I have heard.
Helped.
And to close all the other ones.
No, I refuse to do that.
Yes.
I like to have all sources of information available at hand at all times.
That's good. Because I just closed the live YouTube stream, so I'm just going to have to sneak in and bring that back up. I'm pretty confident it will still be going. That's my thought.
Look, all I can say is that it goddamn better.
Yeah. Look, I don't know what happens once you close the tab. I'm sure that it's still going though. And
how can it not be?
Yeah, absolutely.
How can it not be?
Absolutely. Look, I can see that one. Okay, apparently concurrent viewers is 2, so that's a good sign.
Fantastic.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Are you one of those concurrent viewers?
Yep, absolutely. I'm probably
Is
both of them.
Cam the other?
I'm probably both of them. Yeah. Who knows? Okay. Dear me. Who does know? Who knows these things, Jake? Who knows these things?
Google Analytics.
Yep.
They'll know it.
Google absolutely knows.
They know.
Yeah. Now,
I won't tell you though.
I have just opened up the wrong script twice. Yep. So let me get the right script up. Okay. Hello and welcome to The Pouch. That's good. That's a good warm-up. Here we go. Hello and welcome to The Pouch, the 40-kilometre school zone of podcast that aims to take a not-so-serious look at the week in Australian news and politics. I'm Greg... I'm Greg Savage. I'm Greg Savage.
I'm Greg Savage, love it. And I'm Jake. That sneeze was just my hay fever. I swear, Far Warden. On today's episode, we talk criminals, vaccines, super, and so much more.
That's excellent. And I was just reading the comments on YouTube, which are coming through thick and fast, apparently. Wow. And Jake, while we're as snug as a bug in this proverbial rug, I want to know, why are NRL players having such a difficult time following their own COVID-19 rules?
Spoiler alert, you're only as exciting as your last drug and alcohol-fueled TikTok.
I really wish we could say that on the show. I don't know if we can. Anyway, I think I might be able to edit, bits of what you said into something. Oh, goodness me. What a fantastic start. All right. Okay, Jake, we're coming to you on August 21st, so it's Friday night. We usually record on a Sunday, but we've given ourselves the weekend off, which is lovely to do. Given a couple of factors. Now, first of all, the first factor is the beautiful weather that you guys are having and the tremendously terrible weather that we're going to be having down here in the Blue Mountains.
What do you mean terrible? You're going to be having snow, Greg.
Yeah, it's fun when you're not
Snow.
living in it.
Oh no, look, I've always maintained that snow is the most fun that you can have during a specific period of time, and that specific period of time is holidays.
Okay.
You drive to the snow, and then you drive away from the snow. Then you say, "Wow, it was such a lovely holiday in the snow."
Look, we got
Let's
some
come
great
back
family
another time.
photos. The last time we went to the snow, we had some fantastic family photos. I'll really give you the tip. And so I am stoked about the fact that there might be snow
And now
up
the
there, but
snow's
that's
coming
right.
to you.
That's right. It's fantastic. It's so good. It's so good. Now, look, the other great news that we've gotten over the last couple of weeks, over the last couple of days, sorry, is that you guys have got one case of coronavirus. We've got one case of coronavirus down here in New South Wales. I think that Victoria was down to 100 and something today.
179, I think it was.
179, first day since May or some ridiculous
Yes.
thing that it's been below 200. So it's absolutely fantastic news. Really, really good news. But it's still been a big week. So like we spoke about last week, there's been a lot of reflections. There's been a lot of sort of inquiries, all that sort of stuff. I managed to
soul searching.
Yeah, it is. It is a soul searching time for our nation in the sense that we're trying to figure out,
Where our souls are.
Yeah, well. And, eventually our souls are going to end up in aged care, and whether or not we've been doing a great job of looking after our aged care people up until this point. The people requiring aged care up until this point. I know that that's one of the huge sort of investigations that's happening at the moment. Is that what you call it? Like a commission? That's happening. So that's certainly making us reflect on our own medical and health systems. Not only that, but similar to the climate protests during the bushfires and the Black Lives Matter protests during all the protests around the world, it's brought certain conversations into the front, right? So like when I've got visitors over at the moment, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about aged care, and we're talking about how well Australia actually does, or not well Australia does, at looking after people who require that care. So it's really fascinating, this conversation, I think, and it's a really important one. But yes, you're absolutely right. It's a soul-searching time for our nation. Now, having said that, we still are powering ahead with elections, and one of the very first elections that's happening in one of the sort of major elections that's happening during this coronavirus time is the Northern Territory elections. What are your feelings around it, Jake? How do you feel? What's your gut?
There's been very little news on the elections themselves, which points to one of two things. I suppose the lack of proximity.
Yep.
My personal lack of proximity to the Northern Territory, but I have been keeping abreast of the news. I think it also points to the other thing is that there is very little negative campaigning from either side, and as a consequence, while punters, those willing to take a punt, those willing to make a bet, are backing the Chief Minister Michael Gunner and the Labor Party to prevail in Saturday's general election. There is some speculation that the Country Liberal Party, or the CLP, while they were unpopular previously, they have got a relatively strong leader in Leah Finocchiario.
Okay.
It's the strength of her name that brings the strength of her party. I think.
This is all about what this is really one of the biggest elections that's happening during coronavirus. I know that they're talking about the fact that there possibly is low voter turnout due to coronavirus.
Well, also because there is a very large number of remote Indigenous communities, and it is in very many Indigenous people, because of their lack of need to participate in A lot of the I suppose the social norms that we have, they don't, often they don't have, or many don't have identification, age certificates, birth certificates that are required, or permanent addresses that are required to get yourself on the electoral roll.
Yep.
And as a consequence, they find themselves either unable to vote or unable to vote in their current electorate. So it's a bit of a confusing thing. But they are questioning low voter turnout. There's still the requirement for compulsory voting in Northern Territory, but they are worried that people are afraid to go outside, to go into the tight confines of a voting booth in order to cast their vote.
Yeah, I think that's the real question, isn't it? I mean, in Australia we have compulsory voting. Should people be punished this time around for going out and actually voting in the middle of a pandemic, when their health and well-being is probably already quite low? Is it worthwhile going out and taking that risk? I don't know. I suppose the question might be what are the cases like in the Northern Territory?
Zilch. And they've had no cases.
Yeah, right. So for how long have they had no cases for?
They've had no cases.
Right.
Zero.
Okay. We'll get out there and vote
through the entire COVID. But that's the thing. The Northern Territory does have a couple of open borders, not with South Australia. I think it's just with Queensland.
Right.
But it is one of those things that somebody could be coming on a plane. The hotel quarantine could be lax.
Yep.
Et cetera, et cetera. These things have happened. But I think the answer to your question of should people still be required to vote compulsorily? Should they be fined for not voting? I think the answer to that is absolutely, because the ability to vote in using alternate means such as an absentee ballot, such as a postal ballot, such as a phone ballot. There are all of these options that are available to us as Australians. And as a consequence, it's never been easier to do so. I know we like to leave it to the last minute, i.e. voting day, for a number of reasons. Of course, the democracy sausage is a great reason to get out of the house, or democracy donut, as it were. But look, invariably there are other avenues. If you are afraid of going into tight confines, such as those found at the local voting booth, then do it via other means. But tomorrow is election day.
Yep, they go out tomorrow, Jake. So it'll be interesting to see how this one pans out. See what the sentiment is, around the nation about our leaders, given this unprecedented event.
Yes, indeed. There's been a few of those. One might say the number of unprecedented events is in itself an unprecedented event.
Oh, goodness me, Jake. We're going down an unprecedented event rabbit hole.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
The slippery slope.
All right. Well, good luck to Northern Territorians tomorrow. We will be thinking of you while you go out there and give it your best shot to make our country keep
great
ticking
again.
along. Yes, make our country great again. From last week. When
we went through a great skip
before we jumped off the Scott Morrison bandwagon. Now, speaking of Scott Morrison,
yes,
gosh, he was great this week, wasn't he?
He was firing on all cylinders.
Man, just pow.
You do need to question the number of cylinders that he's got, but he was firing on all of them.
Have you heard this thing about... So he gave a press conference. Have you heard this thing about the fact that all the politicians love the 10 o'clock slot or the 11 o'clock slot or something for their press conferences? So Daniel Andrews has been giving a press conference at, I want to say 10 o'clock, maybe it's 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock every day for the last 50 days. People are saying that he's really earned that slot, that he should just be the one to get that particular slot. Gladys Berejiklian threw in her hat in the ring and gave a press conference during that time. Scott Morrison made this huge announcement at the same time as Daniel Andrews is meant to be on the television. They're saying that he should just have that slot and other politicians should really be working around him. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's the prime spot because
It is.
People who have been working since 7:30 or 8,
Yeah.
10 o'clock is the prime time
Yeah.
to walk into the work kitchen and to brew oneself a coffee, or to walk down to the local cafe and to purchase oneself a coffee, and to look up at the the news screens and to see the quick little press conference, the quick questions answered, and along the ticker tape at the bottom see all the highlights.
Yep, absolutely. Look, again, couldn't agree more, Jake. It's good for the economy. It's good for the country and it's good for the economy. So let's have a think about this. Now, this is all about this vaccine that doesn't quite exist. Well, I suppose the vaccine exists, but the fact that it's not out of trial stage yet, that's not the real thing, right? So it's possible that this thing still might not go ahead. However, if it does go ahead, we're all getting a jab in the arm, Jake.
Yeah, well, that's... Are we? That's the question. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But so the Morrison government said this week that it has reached an agreement with the British pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca to supply Australians with the University of Oxford COVID-19 vaccine for free, assuming that it clears the clinical trials. So there are three main phases to clinical trials, to well-regulated clinical trials. Phase 1 is and then there's phase 2, and then there's phase 3, and then you're all good. No, phase 1 is all about safety, and you can do a little bit of the efficacy stuff, i.e. does it work, but it's mainly about the safety. Does the compound that you're injecting into that human being prevent them from living into the future? And then phase 2 is more about the efficacy, and then phase 3 you want to get as broader reach into the public as you possibly can. And that's truly about the efficacy as well as the dosage. So so once it has passed phase 3, we will know whether we have an efficacious vaccine that we can all use. So the vaccine agreement includes also a $24.7 million contract with the medical technology company Becton Dixon. And they'll be supplying the needles and syringes to make sure that there is a significant supply on hand to roll out the vaccine nationally and immediately. So Morrison said that Australia has pursued the Oxford vaccine because it is, quote, one of the most advanced and promising in the world. But the Prime Minister says, of course, it will continue negotiations with other vaccine companies. We also have, in Australia, on Australian soil, we have the vaccine manufacturer CSL, who manufactures a great number of vaccines to around the world and sells them.
I think they
exports them to around the world.
Yeah, they manufacture all of my favorite vaccines.
All of the best.
Yeah,
all of the best.
Measles.
Polio, measles, mumps, rubella.
Yep. All of them.
Yellow fever.
Yep. Parrot fever. Bird fever.
Hey. Great callback from another show. No, that was good. What he said, continuing on, he said, quote, there is no guarantee that this or any other vaccine will be successful, which is why we are continuing discussions with many parties around the world while backing our own researchers at the same time to find a vaccine. Now, the total cost of the program, once we have a viable vaccine, is likely to be into the billions of dollars.
Yes, that's a lot.
In order to produce the vaccine, to purchase the syringes and needles, and then to conduct the injections. So it's all very exciting.
Now, Juan is on the chat on YouTube.
Hello, Juan.
Hello, Juan. And he has said, if Australia develops a vaccine, or if the UK does it, what is your point of view about how that vaccine should be distributed in Australia? And this is a bit of a segue into what Scott Morrison said. He initially said that the vaccine would be mandatory, and then, of course, he walked that back a little bit, which is, we sometimes encourage our politicians to do that, and I think the fact that he's chosen to do that at this time is wonderful. So what he has said is it will be as mandatory as possible. So it would be not mandatory for everyone, but as mandatory as possible. So I can totally agree with that. I think that's the best way to go about it. What are your thoughts, Jake?
Yeah, well, mine are very much along the same lines as our Prime Minister Scott Morrison. He said, quote, There are always exemptions for any vaccine on medical grounds, but that should be the only basis.
Absolutely. I think that, I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this. I think that, employers should have the ability to, knock people back if they don't have the vaccine for a decent reason. If other people are, childcare, all that sort of thing, they should be able to knock back people who haven't had the vaccine as well. I really do believe that it should be, like I said, as mandatory as possible. Now, already we have vaccines and we have pretty good vaccine programs. If you go overseas, traveling overseas, it's compulsory to get a whole set, a raft, Jake, a selection of vaccines.
A virtual cornucopia.
It is a cornucopia. It's a cacophony. I don't know what that is. A cacophony. It's a cacophony of vaccines that you have to get. That's right.
A bunch of sounds?
Yeah, and they do it in schools. So we inject all our kids in schools. They have programs there for vaccines. It's a wonderful thing.
No jab, no play.
No jab, no play. That's it.
Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean that's pretty well
it's pretty much no jab, no kid, really. I mean, come on.
Well, hey, there you go.
So anyway, look, I believe that we should be enforcing this as much as we possibly can, and that it should be as mandatory as possible. I couldn't agree with the Prime Minister anymore on that one.
I have a slight stake in it, in that my wife has, is immune compromised.
Yes.
Or rather immune suppressed because of her condition. And, we rely on herd immunity in our herd, in our community, or community immunity, if you like.
I do like.
So, look, the more people that get vaccinated, the safer that she is in the community, because she can't get many vaccines.
No.
They either don't work or they simply they not effective. So it's an important thing. I have a stake in this. I want everyone to get vaccinated, so they bloody well better.
We all have a stake in it. Everyone, from the local coffee shop to the builders with buildings with more than 3 stories on them, who aren't allowed a certain amount of workers on their site during the Melbourne lockdown. Now, Jake.
Now, Greg.
Now, Jake. We've tackled the Northern Territory, which is wonderful for us. We've steered clear of the East Coast there, and we're going to steer a little bit further from the East Coast here. We're going to go down to the Australian Capital Territory.
Yes.
They have raised the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 14.
Yeah, which in itself, perplexing that it would ever have been at 10. Yeah. And it's still perplexing that it's at 14. I mean, but it does make sense to move it upwards.
I think so, especially given, what we know about children and psychology and science.
It is, yeah. It's one of those...
I mean, they break the law every 2 seconds.
Yeah, constantly lying.
Constantly lying, stealing your,
cookies.
That they steal the last of the milk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean...
They stay up late.
Yeah, it's true.
Monsters.
All of those things. Constantly swearing. And they do that thing in massive multiplayer online games where when they kill you, they squat over you.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah, me too.
That's totally illegal.
It denotes a level of cockiness.
That's just it's outlawed in our house anyway. All right, so the ACT has become the first jurisdiction in Australia to support raising the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 14. Talk us through it. Tell us why, Jake. What's the morality behind it? Why can't I throw these 10-year-olds in jail?
Well, you can.
Great.
And there's plenty of them in jail currently. I think from memory, and this is going back a couple of weeks, but from memory, at any time there are about 1,000 children under the age of 14 in jail.
Yes, okay. I don't mean to make light of this situation, by the way.
No, of course. But look, it is something that justice campaigners have been campaigning for a significant amount of time. But the resolution, which brings the territory into line with the United Nations standards, says that it will be the responsibility of which parties form government after the ACT election on October to amend the legislation. So they've proposed this. It's been passed, but it is going to require the new government, the next government in the ACT, to sign it into law. But the Legislative Assembly motion passed earlier this week said in an amending any legislation, consideration should also be given to medical evidence on cognitive capacity of children over 14. That is, if you are over 14, you got to check on the cognitive capacity before you seek to put them in jail for whatever crime they might have been accused of. But the executive director of Guggen Gulwin Youth Aboriginal Corporation, Kim Davidson, said that raising the age of criminal responsibility was, quote, the first step to keeping our kids safe, healthy, and out of the dangerous quicksand of the criminal legal system. And it is a big thing because there are a lot of Indigenous kids who are impacted by these lower ages of criminal responsibility.
Right. What's the second step? She said that's the first one.
Second step is getting them out. I think it's putting a metal file in a cake and sending it to every child in custody at the moment.
We might reflect on that.
Yeah.
Let's reflect on that. Okay, so some good news there. That's wonderful news. That's wonderful news.
She said that, quote, children deserve care, support, and help when they are in trouble, not prison cells or paddy wagons.
It does. It sounds very, very logical. It sounds, and I know we've joked about it before, but it just sounds like one of those archaic laws, doesn't it? 10 years old for criminal responsibility is huge. I wonder what the other states are. I don't know what the other states are.
Well, this is the first state to raise it. So
right.
I would
is it all
suggest
10?
that they're probably all around 10.
Oh, goodness me.
Some probably younger.
Right. Well, that's something to reflect on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes. Good. I think that's one thing that, as a society, that I really have enjoyed watching that shift from just throwing people into jail towards helping people. Right. So try and find solutions. Try and find what the underlying causes are. Realize that that maybe they don't have as much choice in the situation as what we might have liked. To be committing these crimes, whether it's due to mental health, whether it's due to circumstance. Pressure from other people, who knows? Lots and lots of reasons why people don't actually have a choice in the matter for when they commit these crimes. So I think that understanding and that empathy, I'm more than happy for our society to move in that particular direction. I think it's great.
Starts a cycle, doesn't it?
It does.
It starts a cycle when you get them in there, and invariably kids, same as adults, but kids absolutely crave a certain level of stability.
Yeah, that's right.
What is more stable than four walls and a roof? People feeding you at the same time every day, exercising every day, education. I think the evidence is borne out that it commences a cycle of recidivism that sticks with those kids throughout the rest of their life, and it's not fair. We need to be rehabilitating, not incarcerating.
Well said, Jake. Couldn't have said it better myself.
You could have tried, though.
I probably could have. But you summed it up very succinctly, which is wonderful. Now, for the last few months...
And also unusual for me.
For the last few months... so that's why I'll quit while we're ahead. For the last few months, there's been... I suppose it's not necessarily rumours, but it's certainly been accepted as fact that the Melbourne outbreak was certainly contributed to by the guards who were guarding the people who had been put into quarantine. An excellent piece of journalism on ABC this week in Four Corners, which was about that particular situation. Interviews with the guards themselves, all sorts of things. If you get a chance to watch it, definitely check that out. It's Four Corners. I forget what it's called. The second wave, I think it's called. But then, once it had been aired, news started to spread this week that that Melbourne's patient zero was in fact not a security guard, but a family of 4. Is that right, Jake?
Well, essentially, it spread not from a security guard, as you say, but through a night duty manager at the Regis Hotel.
Okay.
On Swanston
Who
Street.
was part of the family?
That's right. Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's
and
good.
so,
Just making sure that I'm on the right track.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah. So leaked emails show that the night manager reported on Monday, May 25th,
Yep.
that he had come down with a fever. And late on the afternoon of the following day, Department of Jobs precincts and regional officials were told the hotel employee had tested positive. It is presumed that he caught it from a returned traveller who has not been identified as yet.
Right.
So yes, the emails have been seen by several media sources, and they show considerable effort was then made to contain the spread of the infection. But yeah, so 7 security guards contracted to patrol the hotel, were stood down immediately and told to get tested and go home and isolate. And a small number of hotel staff and health workers were told to do exactly the same.
Okay.
So yeah, it was absolutely crazy, but yeah, not at all related. So this is all due to DNA tracing, so they can trace essentially your specific strain.
Yeah.
Because that's
crazy.
When you contact when you get any tried really hard, but when you get a virus, it essentially goes inside your cells and then becomes your cells. So it adopts your DNA.
So it's literally, when they say DNA tracing, they're literally talking about my DNA. I thought they were talking about the DNA of the virus. So the virus would have...
So it is within the virus, but
yeah, but I just imagine that the virus would have different DNA strands in itself, not adopt my DNA. This is all very the body snatchers.
It's very similar, yeah. I like it. Well, so viruses are, they're notorious for having RNA,
aren't they?
Instead of necessarily DNA, but they can essentially trace. So when you pass
on... So DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. What's RNA?
Ribonucleic acid.
Just ribonucleic acid. Right. Okay.
So
and what's Na?
Nucleic acid.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
and
well, actually, Na is sodium.
Right. And A?
A is nothing.
Right.
Well, just acid.
A is nothing. Okay, all right. Hang on, let me write that down. Jesus,
A equals 0.
Come back to that. I got it.
Yeah. So essentially, if you give COVID to someone, they're able to trace that through that sophisticated DNA tracing. But it's absolutely incredible work that they've been able to done. But incredible work that they've been able to do.
That's all right. I'll edit in the word "do" later, Jake. Don't worry about it.
But no, it is incredible, but invariably it has meant that as soon as that person notified that he was feeling a little bit off, he'd already passed it on to enough people.
Yep, that's it. Done.
To spread.
Yep.
It's all too late now. It's all spread now, but this is all in the... So, interestingly enough, all the criticism of Daniel Andrews and of the Andrews government around, contracting security guards in order to do the job of containing the COVID virus from the quarantined individuals. All of that rhetoric seems to have been, for naught.
Well, we will see how that one pans out, Jake.
We will indeed, as we are panning for gold.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, there has been a bit of gold, actually. We didn't mention that in our good news episode. Let's do a little segue, Jake. We just did a good news episode. Please check that out. It's certainly one of those episodes you don't need to be up to date on what's happening in the news or anything like that, so you can listen to this episode and then jump on over on, whenever another day and listen to the good news episode. You can go back over. We do our good news episodes once a month, and Jake and I just had a wonderful time.
We did. It was a tremendous time. We spoke about pumpkins and picklins.
Absolutely. There's Pumpkin Island.
Yeah. Picklin Island. And Greg, I just would like to also point out, I'd like to take this opportunity to point out that your camera appears to have glitched even. And you have disappeared into the background.
I have.
Some might call it improvement. I wouldn't be one of those. I find your manly visage to be tremendous.
Now, Jake, I'm going to go and have to get a new battery for my GH5, which doesn't have a PowerPoint in it. So you feel free to talk about. Juan wanted us to talk about the Western Australian government situation with Clive Palmer. So you want to do that for me? Go.
Well, I suppose I'd probably like to point to last week's episode where we discussed it exhaustively. No, I'm only kidding. So yes, there was this interesting situation last week where Clive Palmer had sued the Western Australian government in order to open the borders. Essentially, he wanted to open the borders to Western Australia to enable miners and FIFOs and Dido workers. FIFO is fly in, fly out, and Dido is day in, day out workers to travel into Western Australia and indeed back home in order to conduct and continue mining operations in Western Australia. And interestingly enough, the Palmer also had a court case that was commencing related to the loss or damages related to his mining interests that he had. I think it was back in 2012. And Palmer said, "Hey, Western Australian government, I'll drop this case that I have, this little sneaky case that I have related to the border closures. Well, I'll drop that case if you promise to allow my case for damages to go ahead." It just so happens, though, that those damages were to the tune of about $30 billion, Greg.
Right.
$30 billion. So essentially the government, the Western Australian government, decided that they would rush through legislation, and that legislation meant that litigation could essentially not go ahead, both on Palmer's case, and Palmer warned that it may even prevent murderers from being litigated for being charged for murder. So a little bit hyperbolic, but I would suggest that that rush, that's what happens when you rush through legislation. You find yourself unable to fully anticipate the consequences of those actions.
Well done, Jake. That was beautiful.
Greg.
Couldn't have done it better myself. I hope that answered your question, Juan. Now, am I back? Can you see me?
Yes.
Great.
Not only are you back, but you're also front.
Okay, sounds good. Now, having said all of that, Jake, while we're in this little segue space, we did receive a YouTube comment this week, which I'd love to read out to you. We always read our YouTube comments, our reviews, our emails, anything you've got to throw at us. Gazatron81 replied to us on our Clive Palmer versus Western Australian video on YouTube, and he said, "You guys don't know anything about this. No details at all. I feel sorry for people that actually think they are being informed by this podcast." So, some harsh but fair feedback.
Yeah, personally, I agree. With Gazatron,
yeah, well, I did.
3000.
That's basically what happened. As I said, we certainly don't claim to be experts. This podcast is really just a chance for us to catch up on the week in Australian news without taking things too seriously. We realised we didn't know very much about this topic, and we actually spent a week researching and gathering some more information, and we came back the next week with some more information, which Jake eloquently just rattled off while I was fixing up my camera. I said, "You're absolutely right. Under no circumstance should we be seen as a key source of information. It's just two mates trying to process the current news headlines."
Very nice. And did Gazatron 3000 happen to reply with some specific evidence of what we missed out?
No, not really. No. I think he'd had enough.
One comment was enough.
Yeah,
he's got another 3,000 to leave on other people's things.
Yeah, basically. There we go. Now, okay, excellent. Juan has said he will watch last week's episode as well to keep himself informed. Yep. We say, don't do that. Don't do that. What you do is you listen to the news to be informed, and then you watch us just to see what two fellas think. At the end of the week. At the end of the week. Anyway, beautiful little segue there, and
maybe we should change not so seriously to not so journalistically inclined.
To just the Pouched podcast, just don't listen to us. No, absolutely. Look, we appreciate everyone who has been listening. Our views have been increasing steadily over time, so thank you so much for sticking around, and thank you for those who are telling your friends, families, and foes to head to the Pouched.
Especially the foes.
Yep, absolutely. Tell your enemies.
It takes a lot to speak to them.
Does it?
It does, yeah, especially if they're foes.
I think in these unprecedented time, Jake, the foes are coming together and communicating amongst themselves and communicating with their enemies.
Planning.
The
foes are coming together and they're planning.
We're
Hence
pulling,
the pandemic. Greg.
Oh, nice. Something there. You can head to thepouchpodcast.com where you can choose your favourite podcast player of choice. We deal with Australian news and politics.
Not so seriously. Also not so journalistically.
No, that's right. Making it bearable to stay informed, I think one reviewer put, which we agreed with. That was lovely.
I love that one.
Dear me. Now, Jake, a lot of Australians have been googling things over the last few months. YouTube.
Stop though.
YouTube views have gone up through the roof. Netflix views have gone up through the roof. Amazon's now worth $4 trillion. Apple's worth $16 trillion. All of these companies, which potentially could have had really damaging times during these unprecedented times, have actually fared quite well with people staying home and being on their devices. Google has kind of taken advantage of that this week. I know that I was on the computer and I was on YouTube as I am, uploading videos for the Pouch Podcast, and up came this little thing saying that the way that we digest news is at risk, and I was like, whoa, this is really serious. But, me being me, didn't actually click on it. I thought I'll just wait for Jake to tell me what the hell is going on and whether or not I should click on that little button that tells me why everything I'm reading on the news is at stake. Tell me what's happening.
Well, basically, I mean, in a nutshell, greedy media companies want money.
Right. Greedy? Are they greedy though?
Well,
I don't think that's greed.
It's an interesting thing. So different countries have different models for journalism. So in Australia, our the major way that journalistic organisations, media companies, etc., make their money is through advertisements, right? Yeah. Whereas in many other countries, I think Sweden is probably the best example, where a huge number of the public actually subscribe to the media organisations, and as a consequence, when you pick up their news publications, there is virtually no advertisements in there.
Yeah.
But essentially, they are getting extremely good long form and short form, but often in depth, of a very high journalistic integrity news. All of the time. Whereas in Australia, because we in Australia rely on, news and advertising, essentially, if you're not clicking on the news websites, if you're not picking up the newspapers, then those newspapers aren't making enough money to pay enough journalists in order to make the news, et cetera, et cetera. It's a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle. So there is a long known issue since essentially the commencement of social media, and particularly since the commencement of algorithms that help you to see the types of news that you like to see.
Yes.
Creating little echo chambers for all of us. That essentially Google and Facebook and others have, they've been essentially incredibly highly accused of preventing or of essentially bringing people towards their organization's websites,
right,
i.e. Google and Facebook, in order to read the news, and preventing people from going to the original sources of those information, such as the news organizations.
So it's a bit like, so I suppose it's a bit like I use Reddit a lot, and sometimes on Reddit what will happen is you'll click on a link, but it'll actually be behind a paywall, and the people who who are on that particular subreddit will copy and paste the whole text and just put it into the subreddit. So I don't even need to go and pay for it. I don't need to subscribe to it. I don't even need to visit the website to actually read the whole article. Is that kind of where you're going with it?
It's exactly where I'm going with it.
Excellent.
So they get nothing out of that advertising, essentially, because all that you're copying across is the news story itself. So you haven't purchased the paper, you haven't purchased a subscription to the to the news organization, but you've still accessed that that proprietary material that a journalist has gone out and researched in order to write that piece of material.
Yeah, so and in which case, if you lose those journalists, you lose that high quality journalism.
Exactly, and that is something that Australia is struggling with at the moment significantly, and pretty well from all of our sources. But essentially, what is happening here is that there is some new legislation that the Australian government has proposed, which would see companies like Google, like YouTube, which is admittedly part of Google, like Facebook,
admittedly,
it would see them essentially having to provide funding for the news that they provide on their platforms. And what Google has said here is that they may be required in order to provide these services into the future. They may need to require payment from users. So free services such as Google Search or Google News will no longer, could conceptually no longer be workable in Google's terms. They've said it's unworkable. They said essentially the draft laws are unworkable. They said they didn't intend to charge Australians for the basic services, and as a consequence, they would have to eliminate them. It's a crazy piece of legislation. They have, Google especially has suggested that, you would be getting a dramatically worse service out of businesses like Google Search and YouTube.
Yep.
So it's a bit wonky.
It is a little bit wonky. Look, but I don't know how you consume your news, Jake.
In exactly the same way that you do.
I use Apple News. Is that
same?
Yeah, I use Apple News a lot. I try and not block too many news sites I try not to block too many news sites because I want to try and get a variety of views. I've gone to block things like 7 News a lot because they seem to have a lot of stories about Kmart and KFC and things, and it's all a bit weird, and you don't know what's an ad and what's actually news and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, sometimes you see some local news from Channel 7, which is kind of interesting as well, and it gives you a different perspective on things. Things like Sky News, all these different news places that I try and digest to try and get what's happening and different points of view. And different facts as well. I suppose it's not just about opinions, it's also about what the facts are that you're collecting as well. Because like you said, the echo chamber is a very real thing. I'm very aware of it. And trying to break out of that a little bit is refreshing, but also quite a difficult thing to do.
It is.
So I like, I know Apple has a very big stance on privacy and debatable up to a point. And, I quite like the fact that it's not tracking and tracing me and things like that, I suppose. But that's I do. I use Apple News a lot, and then I'll watch a bit of news at night when I get the opportunity. Once the kids and stuff have gone to bed, usually about 9 o'clock at night, I can get a chance to sort of sit down and sort of really digest what's been going on in the world. I
also listen. I mean, I subscribe to Apple News, so paid subscription, and the thing with that is that with the paid subscription to Apple News, they as part of your base subscription, they pay for subscription to other news organizations. So, for example, I can access all of News Limited or the Murdoch papers essentially. I can see all of the Fairfax papers and a number of the other private ones as well. So it's quite a useful thing, and it means that exactly what you've said, Greg, that I have greater access to a range of opinions, greater access to more information on various topics as well, so more facts, etc. So I mean, you and I are probably people who pay for our news information, so it's not these laws aren't necessarily targeted at us. They're more targeted to those people who go to Facebook or to Google for their news.
Okay. All right. Well, let's leave that there, Jake. I think we've covered all bases there. I think, that's something to continue talking about for sure. All right. Now, a lot of Australians have dug into their super. That's not what this story is particularly about, but I find that interesting that there's however many millions of people dug into their super, and the ATO is now trying to figure out what they're going to do about all of those people, whether or not they're going to go after them. But superannuation and the calculations involved in working out how much super you're going to have when you retire and all that sort of thing is certainly in the news at the moment. Huge maths behind it, Jake. Certainly one of the more stable places to put your money these days and to get bang for buck in terms of what you're going to do. I mean, don't take any financial advice. I mean, goodness me, we don't even know what's happening with Clive Palmer in Western Australia. And we're a news podcast. Certainly don't take financial advice from me. My understanding is that it's a safe place to put your money, a safer place than other places, and you get bang for buck in terms of, the longer it is in there with the compound interest, the better off you are when you retire. So tell us what's happening here with the Liberal MPs and their stepped up calls, Jake, for the superannuation guarantee.
It's very interesting. So Liberal MPs, a series of them, have stepped up calls for the superannuation guarantee to remain frozen at 9.5% after the Assistant Minister, Jane Hume, said that she was ambivalent about an already legislated rise to 12%. So the Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg told some news organisations this week that the first recession since the compulsory superannuation started in 1992, and it was, quote, not a good time to increase the cost of private employment, which, frankly, is a reasonable point to make. Okay. So the comments follow Scott Morrison's concession last week that the COVID-19 recession was a rather significant event that could cause the government to reconsider its election promise to leave the super increases in place, which has prompted even fury from Union and Labor, considering now he's pushing back on that promise.
Right. He had promised to keep the increases in place.
Correct.
And now there's some talk that he's backtracking
to allow
on
those
that.
legislated increases. Exactly. He'd promised to allow those legislated increases to take place. And now he's suggesting we're in a pretty serious recession here, guys. We need to think about whether we are actually going to do it. So there was a number of big financial and economic institutions, including the Reserve Bank of Australia this week, but also the Australian Council of Social Services and the Grattan Institute. So a range of different opinions there, warning about an increase to superannuation could come at the cost of wage rises. And, anyone who's been looking into wage growth over the last decade,
well, we all have,
Jake.
That's how we've been spending our time over the last 10 years.
Exactly. So, yeah, look, in real terms, there's been very little actual wage growth, particularly in the private sectors. So it is one of those things that, we do need to consider as a population. Do we want employers to focus on raising our wages, or do we want to focus on, essentially allowing for this super increase to occur? Personally, I would like a super increase. That's just me, and that's for it's a multifaceted thing, but it is one of those things that the more money you have in retirement, A, the less you draw from the public pension.
Yes, that's right.
But B, the more comfortable you are in retirement.
Yeah, and you might enjoy your job a bit more. Like if you know that you've got this X amount of money coming up when you retire, and then it's going to be a comfortable amount for you to live off, you might enjoy the mundane, rubbish job for a little while longer, which is always good for all sorts of reasons as well.
I will refer to my job as that.
My theory is that what they did was they said, look, let's allow Australians to touch their super without too much of a test, that they can just get access to it willy-nilly, see how seriously they take their super, and then we'll put in this freeze, right? Then millions of Australians have said, well, we don't actually care about our super too much. In fact, we're going to dig into it. We're not going to have any savings when we're older. And then they've said, all right, well, they obviously don't care about their superannuation, so let's just freeze that so that, we can move on. Like a political test,
Yeah, well, it is an unfortunate thing because a lot of people have taken their super out, and they've taken it out at the bottom of the market. So when the market is contracted significantly, so any of the losses that occurred, because super is one of those things that's it is a long game. It is one of those things that it sits either accumulating compound interest, or some of them have them on sort of the low risk shares, etc., or low risk type of investments. Invariably, if you do take them out when the market is in a significant low, you do solidify that loss. you're actualizing that loss. So it is quite unfortunate. I think the ATO, the Australian Taxation Office, said this week that around 90% of the people who took out their super were deserving of it. Yep. But there were significant percentages of people who spent it on just everyday expenses rather than on necessary things like paying their rent or getting food or clothes, etc.
Okay, yes, and just as a side note to that, I know that there was an interesting story on a podcast I read that people are now taking their superannuation companies to court based on the fact that they didn't invest in sort of greener energies, or they weren't very upfront with talking about where they were investing their money either. So people emailing saying, "Look where." Yeah. So it's really interesting, that side of things. If anyone wanted to look into that, that's getting a little too serious for us, Jake.
It is. Well, just before we close that one off,
and we're out. Okay, thank you so much.
Just before we close that one off, the ACTU, the Australian Council of Trade Unions.
Yeah, we all know what ACTU stands for, Jake.
Of course. Yeah. Said this week that freezing super at 9.5% could cost a 30-year-old nurse around $121,000 by retirement and $60,000 for a 30-year-old cleaner by retirement. So, right. We're not talking about small amounts of money for individuals.
This is not chump change, Jake.
No, it's not. It is the very definition of not being chump change.
Yes, absolutely. Are we done now?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. That was good. That was a nice little outro, by the way.
I agree.
That was a nice way to end that one.
The only types of outros that I do are nice little ones. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
Jake, thank you so much for chatting with me this week. I know that both of us have had, our little ups and downs during the week. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me about the news headlines. Well, what we consider to be the news headlines.
Such a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. It's been really
always
lovely.
A pleasure.
And like I mentioned halfway through the podcast, please check out our good news episode that we recorded, 15, 20, 30, 50, 60 minutes ago.
55 minutes and 15 seconds.
Yeah, who knows? Who's counting? Check that one out. You can check that one out at any time. Jake, once people have finished checking out the podcast, then come back to listen to this outro, what would you like them to do?
3-step program. I would like them to rate, review, and subscribe. Probably not in that order. Probably subscribe first and then rate and review.
Yeah.
But by rating and reviewing, it greatly helps other people to find us.
Absolutely. And if you want to share the love, you can tell your friends, families, and foes to head to thepouchthepodcast.com where they can choose their favorite podcast player of choice and subscribe that way. And please search for The Pouch the Podcast on all of the socials, except the ones that, people under the age of 30 are using.
Yeah.
We're not on them.
No. We don't empathize with those people under 30. It's too difficult. They have different mindsets.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I can't get my head around it. The green hair and their jackets. Anyway, who knows? Yeah, and the shirts and school. But thank you so much for checking us out. If you want to choose one of the social media platforms, check us out on. I would suggest YouTube. We do have videos up there and we do some live streaming and things like that as well. So check us out. Jake, have a great weekend. You're off the hook, man. That's it.
Oh, I'm so excited. Look, you'll be able to check me out on Google Earth, mowing and painting my arbor.
Okay.
Very exciting things.
I don't know what an arbor is. And I don't want to make a too inappropriate joke to end the podcast on. Oh, dear. All right,
what are
Jake.
you going to do with your spare time?
Edit the podcast, Jake. We've got 2 to edit. Hey? I have to sit here like a chump now and edit these damn things. All right. Thank you so much, Jake. And I really do look forward to speaking to you during the week and recording another episode with you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg.
All right. See ya. Bye, listeners. Bye, everyone else. Bye, viewers.
Bye, listeners. Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye.